Hey guys, welcome back to Ridge Talk. As you can see, this is going to be a special episode. We got some different people sitting in the seats here. And so we're actually here. We're going to do a special thing. We're going to review the mission trip that this team that we just took. We took it about a month ago. And so we're going to run through a few questions and kind of review it and hopefully share the story and kind of give the vision for why did we go and you know, what happened? What did God do while we were there? And so I will kind of kick it off and ask, I have some questions that I've come up with and that we're going to kind of go around and answer. So you guys feel free to jump in at any point. I'll just kind of jump right in and ask the question, why did you go? Why did you go on the trip that we took? Don't everybody answer at once.
Well, I was excited to go because 2 years ago I would sign up to go on a trip, and that was canceled due to COVID. So when this opportunity came up, I was all on it, and I was excited.
Yep. Yeah. Good.
I wanted to go because I wanted to be able to provide for Hadley to be able to see what it looked like to see God and work and what people did in their mission work and what they were doing. And I wanted it to be real. We've read lots of books in her schooling, and I wanted her to be able to see it firsthand what that looked like.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, that's why I went. It's because I wanted to see like the books come to life and see what the people were actually going through being missionaries over there.
That's really neat.
So for me, it was kind of weird. So it was a really cool timing, but I was looking for a way to get more involved in the church. And then I had prayed to God that he had given me a sign of, what direction to take, an opportunity to get involved. And then you guys start talking about the mission trip. And I'm like, am I sure? Are you sure this is what you want me to do? Is this the direction that I need to go? And it kept weighing on my heart. And finally I just said, okay, God, this is what you want me to do. I'll do it. And yeah, it was a life-changing event.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, and I'll just say, I maybe should have introduced each of you guys. If you're watching on YouTube, Bobby may have put names beneath us. But if you're listening, you won't have necessarily known who is saying what. So I know this is out of order, but I'm going to jump in here. So I'm Looch hosting, and I think the order of people that just answered where we had Penny, and then Allison, and then Hadley, and then Jamie. So there's 5 of us, and that's who's on here. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can put a name with a face. But if you're listening, at least you know the names of the people. All right, another question. This is kind of just a fun one. We were there. We were out of town for about a week. What was your favorite fun thing about the trip? Because it's a mission trip. We want to see God do stuff and all that kind of stuff. But, you're going to travel to a new country. We're going to do something fun, too. So what was your favorite fun thing that we got to do?
Well, Looch, I wanted to say so much that was a camel ride. But it really wasn't. I wanted so much. I wanted a camel ride, but no,
anyway, full disclosure, backstory, Penny insisted, maybe a strong word, but Penny really wanted us to go on a camel ride, so we worked camel ride into the thing. I for one was not excited. My wife told me if everyone else gets on a camel, you have to get on a camel. So I rode a camel. Yeah, I agree. That was not my favorite thing either, but did create for a few fun pictures.
Oh boy! But for the but for the funnest part, I would say I enjoyed trying a lot of the different foods. That was fun.
That was
because I love food.
Yeah.
I liked getting ice cream every night after we'd come back from the meeting place. That was really fun.
Yes.
Yeah, it just kind of happened. Like the first night we were in the city, we spent most of our time. We were told, hey, there's ice cream. We can go back and get it if you want. And so we were just like, yeah, let's do that. And then, it became a like every night.
Every
It's like,
night.
it's 9 p.m. Who doesn't need ice cream at 9 p.m. again? And we were doing a lot of walking, so it was probably all right. But that was my favorite fun thing as well, I think.
Mine might not be considered a fun thing, but it was the thing I enjoyed the most was the relationships and meeting new people and seeing what their life was like and just talking to them and investing and knowing them.
Yeah.
So I'd have
great.
to concur with you, Allison. I think my favorite thing was seeing all the different people from all the different cultures and backgrounds coming together to, to be together and praise one God and share that connection, even though they have the vast differences and the vast different cultures. To see that was just really mind blowing.
Yeah. All right, let's keep the kind of the light questions going here. Did you have a least favorite thing?
I did.
Thoughts?
Me too.
I did not like haggling in the market. That was miserable. You didn't know the language. You didn't know
Yeah.
what they were saying. I felt like every time I asked anybody how much it was one price at the counter. It was one price when I stepped in, a higher price when I stepped inside the store, and an even higher price when I pulled out my wallet. So
Yeah.
I did not like buying anything.
Now Jamie did though.
Yes.
I thought it was a game. It was
he was
how
good
low,
at it.
how low can I get them to go?
Jamie learned like 6 words, and they were all haggling words. Is Bishal? Is that right?
Like, shall, yeah.
Yeah. Like how much? Yeah.
Yep.
And Jamie became our haggler. If we wanted something, we would take Jamie. and be like,
Absolutely. I said, "Hey, Jamie, I want this, and I'm willing to pay $10 for it.
Yeah.
Can you make it happen?"
Yeah.
And he did.
pretty
Yeah.
He
well.
did awesome.
I agree though. Haggling was not my favorite.
Well, and that's funny because, honestly, my least favorite thing was the language class. I still can't tell the difference between the 3 different H's and the J's. And
We had a lot of fun that day.
yeah, I left that language class with a migraine.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It was
I
like an hour and a half long crash course Arabic class. And yeah, it was
It was rough.
I think
It was.
I don't know if anybody made it more than 30 minutes before they were like, "Oh gosh, this is a bit much."
at one point I just kind of closed my eyes and just kind of just sat there in silence.
And you were the star student.
Yes, he
I
was.
learned enough to haggle.
Yeah, the rest of us were like, "Oh dear." No idea what's going on here.
Yeah, definitely was my least favorite was taking the class because as soon as we get started, I'm like, there's no way I'm going to learn this. So I kind of gave up early on. And, but I think if you really, needed to learn it, then I think I probably would have tried a little harder, but it would take a long time. So
Yeah.
I did not like the smell of the fish market.
We did have to walk by a fish market.
And I
A
did
lot.
not like the drivers. They were a little too risky for me.
That was the other thing I had written
Yeah.
down was the traffic, particularly in the big city we flew into.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. The way they do roundabouts there,
There's no
it's
round. You go
it's kind of a
straight.
free for all, but it's also if you're in the middle, you have the right of way. So people just go into the middle. It's 4 wide going around a circle, and the person in the middle, if they want to get out, they just go out and everybody stops and
And people
Yeah.
just stop and put their hazard lights on, and then you just go around them.
Yeah.
You park in the middle of the street with your hazard lights. And that's okay.
I rode in the front seat of a car once and I was like, I'm not doing that again.
so I took it for the team.
Yeah, that's true. I was like,
Yes.
one of you guys has to get up there because I'm just not doing it again.
And then you always had to watch your motorcycles because they have no rules at all.
Even less than they have in America.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
On
were-
the sidewalks.
They
Just
were wild.
going.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So what were you most fearful about coming into the trip? I'm asking that question, assuming probably everybody had a fear on some level. So what were you most fearful about going into the trip?
Say the language barrier. Trying to figure out how to communicate with them. And being able to have that, build that connection, even though having such a large language barrier.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys felt this, but when I go to a country and the language, it's a different language, but it uses the same letters, same alphabet as we have, I can start to figure out a few words and give me a few days and I can start to function a little bit. We're in an Arabic country. Arabic, when it's written, it looks like squiggles to me, squiggles and dots and dashes and things, and I'm like, it's looking at it is worthless. So I feel that was.
Yeah.
The language was definitely intimidating.
Well, it helped though because they also had French, and French is like you said, I could figure out some
Right.
of the words.
Yep.
So that I was like, oh, that's a French sign. Okay, I'm good.
Yep.
I was fearful of the gender, being a woman, being an American woman in this country. How would I be perceived or treated, and or even bringing my daughter, like
Yeah.
fearful of things that could happen. I will say or add to, after getting there, there were very real things to be aware of, but it wasn't any different to me than being in New York City. I would be more aware and more conscious being in New York City of other people around, but it was kind of just where we were, and I didn't feel unsafe.
Yeah.
But that was my fear in
Yeah.
going over there.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense.
Yeah, mine would have definitely been safety. But I didn't think that was a problem at all.
Yeah.
At any one point, I didn't feel not safe.
Yeah, and when we were out walking, Hadley was charging ahead. Like she was, well, I'm a bit of a slow walker, and it was like I was having to kind of jog to keep up. So, hey, you definitely didn't seem like you felt unsafe once we were actually there.
Once we were there, I was fine.
So definitely the language is what my biggest concern. But once I figured out we had Jamie here, don't listen to him. He was amazing. So I said, hey, can you order me a cappuccino, please? And it all worked out great. So,
Or you could go into the ice cream shop and ask what this is, and then end up with it in your hand.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, things like that did happen.
It was good.
Oh, that's funny.
There's a lot of pantomiming.
And I was a little concerned too. Even though I love being around people, I love having conversations. I just, in the back of my mind, think, would I be able to have meaningful conversations with all the people we would, meet? And actually, all that worked out great. We'll probably talk about that later. But
Yeah, no, those are good things. I was definitely a little nervous about the language for all those reasons as well. But, we came back and we ate and, made it home every evening.
Right.
Yeah. Do I have a funny? I'll say this. I could have said this under if we had a least favorite thing. We've mentioned a couple of times that we were near a market. And I just want to tell a little story here. The market was it's an ancient market, so it's kind of narrow. It's on a hill, whatever. And there's a main drag, and then there's also to the sides, there's these alleyways. And my least favorite thing of the whole trip, I think, was at one point when one of our team members, Jamie, decided we should go down this side alley and just see what's down there. And from the middle, I could just tell it's just jewelry. Like that whole area, it's just jewelry. We don't really need to go down there. And so we did. We went down there. We didn't stop anywhere. We just kept walking. We get to the end, and it kind of ends, but it goes left. And so we kept going. And then we found this is myself and Jamie and Penny. We found ourselves very quickly in a residential area where, I mean, again, where there's walls and you can't really get out without going back or finding your way out. And it wasn't that bad until what happened exactly, Jamie? There was somebody walking behind us and
yeah, so we asked this lady which way to the Medina. She told us, and then a little bit later, she was trying to get our attention. She was tapping her wrist, and I thought she was trying to ask what time it was. So I told her, and then she said, no, and started pointing behind us and going, you guys got to go. And at that point, we were like, okay, maybe we should step it up a little bit. We should move a little faster.
This was right after we had passed. Somebody had a red bucket of paint and it had fallen and splattered everywhere. And for a split second, I thought it was blood. It was paint. But for a split second, I was like, what are we doing, Jamie? We're going to die here. Yeah, no.
I have two things. One, did you die?
No. Did not.
Two, look at the fun story that we have to share now. It was an adventure.
Yeah, I didn't really come into the week super fearful of anything, but I'd found something to be fearful of while we were there. All right, so next question. What most surprised you from the trip? Something you saw, something you learned, something you weren't expecting. What was most surprising?
I was really, really surprised and taken back by the multi-cultures, multi-denominations. I felt like there were multi-funding agencies behind a lot of the people that we came in contact with, but very unified in worship of Jesus, and like all the things that I feel like we can argue about in the United States, and the petty things, and I think this and you think that, and it's very divisive. There were so many unifying, or there were groups that were unified in Christ, that they weren't worried about the petty things. They were just focused on Christ and sharing him with the people there.
Yeah.
That was a beautiful thing to me. And then the one other thing that I thought about was, it shocked me. It was shared that it takes around 7 years to make a connection and reach somebody in a Muslim, in their Muslim faith, and bring them to Christ. That 7 years I found staggering.
Yeah.
And how we just want it to happen like that.
Right.
And the patience of the people that are working
Yes.
there, and what they're facing on a yearly basis.
Yeah.
I thought that was huge.
I'll jump in here too and just tag what you said and say, I know we haven't shared a ton of details about exactly what we did or exactly where we went. And a lot of that is just out of respect for the Christian workers who are over in the place that we were in. It's not entirely safe for us to share all the details, but I will just kind of say, yeah, where we were at was kind of a unique kind of connection point and hub of several different organizations and ministries where, yeah, rather than like you said, Allison, rather than the different organizations being like, oh, being territorial, or, you know, you do that way and we'll do it this way, and, you know, just live in our own space. Yeah, there was a ton of overlap and working together across lines that maybe wouldn't have been crossed in our world. So yeah, that was a super neat thing. What else? Something else that was surprising in our week that we had overseas.
Something that surprised me was like how adaptive the kids were that were there. Like they had moved across the country and were still like bubbly and excited to see you and made new friends. And that was just crazy to think of how they just left where they were from, and how hard that would have been, but how cool it was, and what a good testimony they have now.
Yeah. Are you talking about the kids of
The
like
workers.
the workers? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely noticed that as well.
Yeah. That was really
Even the how quickly they even took to us, like having met us only that week. You know, a couple of them took us around town, and the night we did kind of like the youth night, just how open they were and how quickly they kind of like flung to us. You know, sitting there and reading stories to them. You know, those 3 and 4 year olds were like jumping on our laps in there and like clinging to us. It was just you could tell that they don't have the fear, because I think they're so surrounded by love that they don't see that. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. So one night we did a kind of a vacation Bible school event, but it was just a one night thing, and it was also kind of like a parents' night out. And so yeah, we got to have a bunch of the kids from the church, and so Lauren, who we support as a church, she was working in an international church, and so a lot of the people that attend that church are somehow connected to one of these organizations. And so yeah, we did a night where we had a bunch of kids in their little space, and it was fun. For some reason, I don't even know why I volunteered for this. There was Jamie and I volunteered. We took the 3 and 4 year olds, and it was awesome. But no, he's right. Like they were kids, and they were, yeah, you could tell they came from homes that were loving and supportive, and that was a really neat evening.
Well, one of the things that really surprised me, we can read about it in books, but to actually experience it where you're in an area where you use code words and where there's an underground and where you can't talk openly and freely. And it just makes me think so much here in America, how it's not like that for us. And yet they're so compelled for the love of Christ to, where it wasn't quite as dangerous as other countries, but there are countries where it's very dangerous to do that. And yet they're just, the love of Christ just compels them. They want to. One of the biggest moments for me would be speaking with, and I think you all probably spoke with her too, one of the young girls there. And so one night we met with college students from many different countries. And this one particular girl was from the States, and she was going to be graduating, and she wanted so much. Her heart was to go to a closed country where just months before they had shipped all the workers back home, and the Christians that were there were being persecuted, and yet. So while we're just talking about, the plans and both she and her friends, so wherever, the Lord sends me is where I'll go. But she said, but my heart really is to go back to that country. And she just prays, and she said her prayer is that God will make a way. And so that was just very surprising to me, and very heartwarming, and good to see and good to hear that. And particularly being such a young person. I think about when our people we might know are going to graduate from high school or from college and what's on their hearts. Very eye-opening and kind of almost life-changing for me. So.
I'll say something. There were a couple of things that really surprised me just culturally. Like there were some things. I mean, I read a book. Actually, Penny bought me a book a while back to prepare to go to this country. So I was like, well, I guess I should read it. And I did. And so I kind of had in the back of my head some of the cultural things. I kind of knew, oh, I'm going to run into this or that. There were a couple things, though, that were really profoundly interesting to me. One, kind of a silly one, but just their time clock, their cultural time clock was so different. The place we stayed, the Airbnb that we all kind of got to stay in, it was pretty close to a pretty vibrant area of the city. And I've talked about the ancient market, the Medina, going into that. In the mornings, I was going out and running, and at like 8 a.m., there was nobody out. All the shops were boarded up, completely closed. Like but like by, mid-afternoon, you could barely walk through it without bumping into people. So, 8 a.m., 9 a.m., whatever, I'm running, and it's empty. Well, then, in contrast, we would be... winding down for the evening, our events would be done. Again, we were out getting ice cream at like 9 p.m. and like people were still out and about. Yes. Like we would walk through this main area with a water fountain. And I mean, there were every night at like 9:30 p.m. when we were walking through there was some sort of performance, some sort of thing going on. But yeah, then we would go and try to go to bed. And I mean, it didn't matter if we were going to bed at 10 p.m. or midnight. Like the streets were loud. Like... that was different, but I don't know if you guys felt that, but I just was like, that was a different thing. Another thing, I don't know if any of you guys have any thoughts on this, but I felt like the culture was very different between the experience for men and the experience for women.
Yes.
I don't know what you guys saw about that, but I don't know. For me, like the men, in a lot of ways, they kind of dressed, and I mean, speaking a different language and whatnot, but they kind of dressed and acted the way that you would expect young men from American cities to act. Just kind of normal men. And then the women, I mean, you could tell who was from that country. The women, like they would have the full, headgear on. They'd be fully covered and long sleeves and long dresses and different things. And I felt like you could tell, like, the women, like, that's just the girls, the women, that's what they were just used to. And like, there were a couple times when I was out walking and like, we were just behind a group of girls that were probably in their teens or 20s, and they were all dressed like that, all covered up. And they're just like walking and laughing. And it was just that was a moment for me where I was like, oh, it's so different. Like,
yes.
that's, it's almost like they're not living in the same reality. And yet for the men, it was almost like, I don't know, it wasn't that different. That was really bizarre to me.
Yes.
I don't know. And then the fact that we were told that a really high percentage of marriages there end in divorce. Yes. That was maybe, that was one of the, that was one of the most surprising things to me. Just that, I mean, you think of Islamic culture as very conservative and, so I just, in my head, I'm like, oh, well, people probably get married and stay married. And we heard, no, it's actually a really high percentage that end in divorce. And a lot of times the woman walks away from the marriage with the clothes on her back. And that's it. So I don't know. For me, that was shocking and surprising. I'm like, this is the same world that we're living in. And yet that's a world of difference. So I don't know.
It opened my eyes up too to even recognize here in the States that women in the Muslim culture, I often have seen them at the pool and just thought they want to keep to themselves. They're quiet, they're reserved, this or that. And it came to my attention that in actuality, they're starving for conversation. Can feel very alone. I mean, even like how I felt over there in American clothes and different and not connected with the women there, that here in the United States, that lots of times just go start a conversation with them, or, that it's probably more out of lack of connection. But that they're probably really wanting to have that and just don't, because of the overlap in cultures, because it is extremely different.
Yeah.
Well, and I noticed like over there they have a hospitality kind of part of their culture that we don't really necessarily have here in America.
Absolutely.
Where, we were leaving the train station the first day we got there, and we saw that guy. There was an older woman that was struggling with a suitcase and a child, and he just comes and he picks up this child and he carries the child down the escalator for her, and we all kind of thought like they were together. And then when they got down and he handed the child back and then he walks away, we're like, oh, you guys aren't together, you were just helping.
Yep.
In America, you would never, like, I would never go and just randomly pick someone else's kid up.
Yeah.
And that's just normal there.
Yeah.
And then I saw it where we didn't speak their language, and a lot of them were linguistic, and they would go through, okay, you don't speak Arabic, let's try French. Oh, you don't speak French? Okay, let's try Spanish. Yeah. Okay, English. That's the only one. Okay, let me call my 11 or 12-year-old grandson out here and have him talk to you.
Right.
So it's interesting you mentioned about the language. So one of the things that we did was we had a class, and we would just have conversation with the locals. And so that was fun. The locals would come in and just really get conversation going, just to practice. So I found that night to be probably one of the most interesting nights, is getting to talk with locals there. And so I happened to be speaking with, we had two different groups. And the one lady comes in and she was pretty, started asking about me. I was like, all right. So I was just telling her my name and all that. And I'm married and just had many years. She goes, what does that mean? Like, what is that? 35 years. I mean, what does that mean? So I just, okay, we'll talk about that anymore. And then, but as the night goes on, talking to two different women, they both told me they hated men. And I was like, oh, and so of course I couldn't speak into that at all, but just the idea of the culture there and the very high divorce rate, and what's behind that. I think by the more you get to talk with locals there, the more we would be able to understand that.
Yeah.
So, but.
All right, I have two more questions for us. One, and we've kind of already hinted at this, but maybe there's some more answers to it. What was the most meaningful thing that happened for you in the week? It could be something, something that maybe God revealed to you in the week, or something that you observed. The most meaningful thing.
For me, it was probably seeing all the different people worshiping at church. And it was even different from the two churches we went to. But to see how different it was, and that they worship like that could be their last church service. And how cool that was to see them express themselves in such a way. Like, we don't do that here in the States. We take church for granted, that like we can come to church and don't think a thing about it, whereas they could probably never come back. And that was really cool.
That was cool. I know one of the things that Lauren told us before we even went was, she's working at that international church, and we got to go to an international church service in two different cities on the Sunday that we were there. One on Sunday morning, one on Sunday evening. But yeah, one of the things she told us was that when she kind of first started doing the youth group, I don't remember how many kids she said were in it, but it wasn't a high number. I think it was less than a dozen. And she said there were like 7 or 8 different like primary languages spoken in that. And so just to your point of diversity, like it was, there's a lot in that space. So that we were in the Arab world, and yet in the international church, you also saw a lot of diversity and people from all over the world and all over Africa. That was cool.
One of the most meaningful things that I saw or even brought back with me was the living their life on mission And so, like, we're at a prayer meeting and they had practiced the language and had memorized this verse, and we're kind of sharing testimony. If you had an opportunity to share, your Bible verse with someone this week. And I was like, I can do this. Like, I don't have to do this in another language. Like, this could be something that I do in West Virginia. That and just like the position of how they lived their life was eye opening to me, that this wasn't something I had to do in another country, that this was just a mindset of how you were going to live.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that they pointed out was the people over there were amazing. And we're sitting in this room and we're worshiping together, and they're fun to talk to, and they're easy to talk to, and they're easy to get along with. And they're like, we have to fight to be with the locals. Like, we could sit in this group and hang out, all day long and never do anything, but we have to fight to share Jesus with other people. And I was like, I can do the same thing. I can sit in my church and I can come to my small group and I can just be comfortable where I am, but I should fight for relationships and for opportunities to share Jesus with other people. And just even seeing somebody live it out and recognizing I can do this at home was probably the most meaningful thing that I saw while we were there.
Yeah. It's really good.
So for me, I had to wrestle with my own doubts when I was signing up for the mission trip. I went from just wanting to be more involved in the church to, okay, I'm going to go on a mission trip. What was going to be my role? Why was I going, and why did I keep feeling like God wanted me there? Well, while I was there, I had the opportunity to actually meet 2 different families there that were struggling with asthmatic children. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that being a respiratory therapist and an asthma educator were going to be used on this missions trip in a Arab country across the world. And the connections that were there were, just really mind blowing. That one of the families, the worker family that was there, was from Venezuela. And they didn't have access to healthcare there. The healthcare that they did have access to wasn't the greatest. They were really struggling. The mom was an asthmatic, the child was an asthmatic, and they were really looking for answers. And the pulmonologist, the pediatric pulmonologist that I work with here in West Virginia, is from Venezuela. So I was able to connect to them and then also give them a lot of resources. And then the other family was that they were from America, but their children were actually born overseas, were born in Jordan. And the other pulmonologist that I work with here in West Virginia, of all places, is from Jordan. So the odds of them being, the child was born in Jordan. I work with a Jordanian pulmonologist here in West Virginia, a family from Venezuela in an Arab country across the world, working as a missionary worker, and then working with the Venezuelan pulmonologist. Having those connections and being able to use those skills and provide that help while I was over there was really, an eye-opening, I saw God's plan unfold before me, and I'm like, okay, you did have a purpose for me. You did have a reason for me to be here. And it was just, it was really eye-opening and, like I said, life-changing opportunity.
That's such a cool story,
Just,
man. Gave me goosebumps. Like, just how God brings things together.
Yeah, the connections, and then just sometimes you just have to say, you don't know why, but okay, God, I'll follow. I'll listen and I'll follow, and He'll show you why,
Yeah.
That's great. You cannot make that up. You just can't make this kind of details up. And I want to say, too, that it was awesome, too, because Looch got to speak at the first church.
Yeah.
And I was just so proud to be a part of that. And half of them up there just, giving the message. And it was so awesome because there were a couple of people in front of us, and they each had pens, and another person would make sure the other guy there had a pen because they were ready to take notes. And they were just like, as you're saying, Allison, so eager. And so that was just beautiful. But one thing that was meaningful, too, was, again, it's kind of mentioned here, is just a commitment. We talked about in the message today, Looch, about just their commitment and their commitment to Christ and their heart to share Christ in the Arabic world. That just I don't know, like I feel my heart just, it's just amazing, you know, and it's just so beautiful because we're looking at nations that are lost.
Yeah.
And I can imagine it being overwhelming at times when the need is so great and the harvest is ripe and the workers are few. And so I think that's probably what he meant, just to, you know, to pray and that we have more workers, because there are people out there who need to hear this good news, and to think there are people that God has specifically put on their hearts to be in this certain area in this certain time of life. And even though some of the workers share the challenges that they have, even with their young children, how it can be so difficult, and yet here they are, and they're there working. So it's beautiful.
I was gonna say, yeah, you just kind of touched on it there at the very end. Probably the most profound thing to me, the most meaningful thing to me was, yeah, some of those conversations we're able to have with some of the people that are from the States who are serving over there, and you know, I think sometimes it can be easy to think, oh well, you know, God put a special call in their life, so they're some kind of superhero or whatever. And one of the families that I think we all connected with on a level, you know, they have a couple kids, but one of them's a little girl who's the same age as my little girl, and so we're just kind of comparing notes and like, oh, is your daughter into this? Yeah, like the wife was like, does your daughter just like exist like in as if life is a musical? And I was like, yes. Like I had a video from like while we were over there where my daughter was like literally dancing down the street at like a city thing. Anyhow, it was just like, you know, there was real, you could tell like, yes, there was a real call in their lives. And it was rich and it was good, but also, man, yeah, they were just people. They were just being obedient to the call of God, and it was good, and it was rich, and it was also hard. And you know, one of the things that I was like, man, that it kind of caught me off guard a little bit. I just wasn't quite ready for that. How like, yeah, of course, they're just people like all of us, and God has led them in that direction, and they're just being obedient to God. And there's some things that are really hard for them, and they were sharing some of those challenges and what it's like when they come back and then have to go back, and what's really home, and where is that, and all those kind of things. Like, yeah, it's hard, but it's really good. And yeah, the things that God uses, and the fact that he uses people like us, I think it's so easy to, I don't know, for me at least, easy to forget that and to think, oh yeah, that's someone else's work. Like God will call someone else to do that, somebody more special.
Yeah. But I do think too, even talking about and not taking away from their struggles, and they face a lot that I don't face because I'm here. But a lot of it was the same mom worries. Yep. Like, does my kid have a good relationship? Do they have a good friend at school? Should I put them in a different school? Should I worry about this school because of what's being taught there? Or, you know, I mean, it was a lot of the same universal mom worries that, yes, they were a little different because of the cultural differences and because of their calling. But at the same time, at the end of the day, they were people like us. Yeah. And, but so my thought is too, though, that it doesn't matter. Don't be fearful of those things over there, because I could sit here in West Virginia and have the same fears and the same worries. It's not any different. It's just the worries and the fears, and ultimately we need to trust God. But so don't let that scare you from going over or doing something like this as well. Right.
Yeah, that to put a scripture on that, it just makes me think of, it's James 5:16 or 17, where James is talking about how Elijah was a man like us, and yet he prayed. Obviously God was leading him. He prayed, and it didn't rain in the land for 2.5 years because God was making a point. Or maybe it was 3.5, I don't know, I'm forgetting, but like it didn't rain for a really long time because Elijah prayed. But why? Because God was leading him. And it's, you know, and then, you know, God prayed, or God told him to pray again, and it'll rain, and it did. And so same idea, that like, yeah, they're people who have chosen to be obedient. And I don't know, yeah, that was profound. All right, last question. Is there anything that you took away from the trip? Anything that was really impactful, or anything that you saw, or that you were just like, man, I want to bring that back and start to implement it? I think we've touched on a few things that could have been answers to that question. Right. But is there anything that you've brought back and you're like, oh, I want to put that in, or into my life, or I already have?
Well, Well, one of the things I was thinking too is that while we're there, one of the pastors is actually back in the States now raising money, and it takes money to live there. Although so it does take money, and so they're back raising funds now. So I know our church, supports one of the workers there, and so I thought that would be a good idea for me personally is to help support the workers. And when you see what they're doing, they see how they've kind of have made this their life, and I thought, well, that's the easy thing to do, really. One of the things that I just kind of really struck home with me is that how these workers, how do you meet someone who's of a different faith and share Christ with them? And I'm sure you already know the answer, but the answer, of course, is through relationships. And as Allison said earlier, it takes patience and it takes time, and yet that's what the Lord would have us do. And so, and interesting too, I just finished a book where we talked a lot about this. And so really focusing in on relationships with people. I know Looch has been teaching us too about pray as you go and make a list of people who do not know Christ. And then that God will he'll make a way. And so that's one thing I've already been doing is just really thinking more about building relationships with people like they do in this country. And just continue to do that here. And I would say, do I have a call to go to another country? No, I don't. Not as of yet. I would say that, but boy,
And
my
that's okay.
heart. But I tell you, my heart is definitely a stirring in there that we have less challenges here, but there still is still a challenge, and that there is a need right here in our own state, in our own town. And so I feel like I'm just even more committed to having my life be about building relationships with people in the hopes of sharing Christ's love with them and Christ's love with others, and just trusting God, when they're freed of that. And I figure they can certainly do that there with the extra challenges. Then certainly, I can do that here. And I think again, just being obedient, to the call to sharing God's love to all. So
It's good.
So one of the really cool things that I saw during the prayer day on Thursday was they give all the workers a Bible verse, and they have to learn that Bible verse in Arabic, and then they kind of challenge them sometime throughout this week until we meet again. See if you can put this Bible verse into conversation and use it as kind of an opening to discuss Christ. And I kind of took that and I'm like, okay, well, if they're doing it there in an Arab country, and they have to learn it in Arabic, why can't I just do the same thing in English when it's my native tongue? If they're taking that extra effort, I can do the same thing here. And use it as an opportunity to evangelize here in our own country, because while there's it was an Arab country, there's still tons of people in our own area, in our own backyard, who don't have that relationship with Christ yet either, that we can still mission to. So
that's good.
For me, it was probably that I should be more open about my faith and show other people. Because, I have nothing to fear. They can judge me, yeah, that's fine. But, I physically have nothing to fear. So I can invite them to church and not have to worry about something that could happen if I invited them. Nothing could happen to me, so why don't I just share it with everybody?
Yeah.
That was probably my biggest thing.
Wow.
One of the things that I said when we came back was, you don't know what you don't know until you know. And that, I felt like there was just this veil that was lifted of what I didn't know before, and the specificity of prayer requests for the workers over there, and the intricate things that they needed for their families, or for their mission work, or for their church. And made a point to, and want to continue to know specific things to be lifting up for them, and to reach out to them periodically and say, is there something that I can be praying for you, instead of just being shallow and just a name that I was saying off. Not that those prayers weren't heard, but that I just want it to be more specific and more personal and deeper, because I've seen now a deeper level that has always existed, but I didn't know was there.
Yeah.
That's good.
That's really good. I would say for me, this was not something new particularly, but trips of various types have really been major catalysts in what has changed my life. And so there were lots of new things that I learned and saw God doing that just wouldn't have happened without going. And that has been a repeated pattern in my life. I do believe that most of what God's going to do in our lives happens over a long period of time in the mundane and just in the day-to-day following Jesus in our normal lives, because most of our lives are normal, whatever that means. But most of our lives are routine and in our own homes and stuff. But, for me, all the things you guys just talked about, like that happened because, like you just said, Allison, like you don't know what you don't know until you know. Like and that doesn't happen until you go. And so, yeah, for me, trips have been major catalysts for most of the big changes that have happened in my life. And so, yeah, for me, I bring home just the reality that I need to continue to prioritize these things. I don't think I answered the question at the very beginning. Why did I go? I went because you guys signed up, and that meant I got to go. Because I signed up and said, I want to lead a trip there. I asked Lauren way back when we, in a Zoom call a long time ago, hey, could we ever take a trip there? And she's, yeah, please do. And so I went because you guys signed up. And then even so, I feel like in a lot of ways, I'm the one who's blessed by that, because I'm, we as the people who were going, we're the ones who were learning and bringing stuff back. And so really that was the heart and the hope behind this conversation. I hope it's been helpful. Again, I know that we were kind of a little bit not super like answering all the questions and here's, exact things and whatnot, but that was on purpose. It was, going into a place where mission trips are not, are technically, you're not supposed to do them. Although ours didn't look like going out in the street and handing out Bibles. It was a little different than that. I think that's probably been clear. But yeah, so we've been a little bit like that. But the reality is, I hope that even just hearing some of these stories, hearing some of the things that we've brought back, that this is, beginning to create a little bit of a vision for more people, for what would it look like for me to step into a trip like this? Why would I, the next time Southridge is talking about a mission trip and, hey, you should come to this interest meeting. Why should I go? What's in it for me? I would hope that you would hear this and you would say, you know what? Kind of like Jamie's story. Maybe this is the next step that God's calling me into. Maybe he's going to show me something, do something in that time and in that space that just isn't going to happen unless I go. Doesn't mean God loves you any less if you don't go, but I think a lot of times he gives us, when we step out in faith, he shows up in our lives and we know him in new ways. So all that to say, we hope this has been an encouragement. Speaking for myself, but I think speaking for all of us, we'd be happy to answer more questions or fill in more of those details kind of offline. If anyone would like to reach out to any of us, I think we'd all be open to that. And so, yeah, I'd just say, thank you. Thanks for listening. And I hope that you've enjoyed this special format, this podcast episode. We haven't done one quite like this. So hope you've enjoyed it. And I hope that you guys will like and share and all the other stuff that I'm supposed to say here. And I don't exactly know what I'm supposed to say. So that's it. Thank you.